Welcome to Transform Your Relationships Live. I'm Laura Rubinstien here with the awesome and wonderful Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Hi, Rhoberta.
Hi, Laura. This is a wonderful week. Don't you just feel like you can breathe and relieve?
I am breathing. I am not yet relieved, but I am breathing.
Good. Good.
People who make everything about themselves, sometimes we don't recognize them, and sometimes it's a lot. It's like, wow, how did they come to that conclusion? Why did they make it about themselves? It's pretty interesting when you come across somebody like that. It's almost like sometimes I feel like, how did they even come up with that connection to something that happened that really had nothing to do with themselves, but now we're talking all about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a brain twister.
Well, it is. And there are kind of two big streams of folks that go in two different directions around this. Some people, all they know, the only world that they have is what's going on within themselves, and they're trying to make everything fit. And then there are the people that suffer from tendencies towards narcissism that think I'm the only thing that matters in the world. And that makes a huge difference.
It does. They're still recognizable, but one is a little bit more damaging, it would feel like, than another.
Well, yeah, because one's only comfortable in that sphere, and the other one is only comfortable being the center of attention. Like I have a friend who, when she's stressed, everything becomes all about her. Yeah, and over the years, I've said things like, we were just discussing my health. How come we're talking about you right now? And she'd go, oh, I didn't notice. Because she doesn't know how to talk about my health. So she goes back to something she's familiar with, right? She doesn't know what to ask. She doesn't feel comfortable. She doesn't have anything to offer. She has no insight. And so she goes back to what she knows. And that's different than saying, I know everything about everything, just ask me, which is...
Yeah, there's a sense of insecurity and discomfort with being with another's problem that they can't solve, right? And so they make everything about themselves because that's where they're more confident and comfortable. But then there's someone who's like, I know everything, and because you're saying that, it must be about me, and let's talk about me. Because I don't really care about you, or something like that.
I know everything, and let me tell you, because of course you're fascinated,
And I have to be in control, right? And if I'm not in control and it's about you, then I'm out of control, right? And then things can go awry in my world.
Yeah, well, I think that you hit on a really big one, because in one realm, it's the control of others, and the other is the control of self.
And just
right?
getting to a place where they're comfortable and their ego is protected, versus I need to have so much control here about the whole situation, because in both cases there's fear, right? But one is more,
Well, one is fear of not showing up well, and the other is fear of not being validated by others and adored. And if I'm coming from a fear of, when you may be low self-worth, and I don't know how to show up, and all I know is my little world, and I'll disclose a little bit, but I don't know how to get into your world, then I'm trying to control myself. But if I'm in the other area, the hijackal leaning area, then I want to control other people. So I will take up the airspace. I will take the attention. I will be the authority. I will be the person who should be validated for my wonderful, insightful opinions about everything. And, it's like, talk to the hand. Not interested,
We got to set that boundary, right?
Yeah.
But so I clearly get it now, that there are two types of people who make things all about themselves. One who are just trying to control themselves, and then others who need to not only control themselves, but control other people.
They
Actually,
have
they don't
no intention of controlling themselves.
even better, right? Ooh, it's insidious. Don't we love talking about these topics?
Yes, but every time we talk about these topics, we also go, "Oh, there are all those people in the world." Yeah, and you're gonna meet them. The actual numbers of people who have narcissistic tendencies, according to the research, is growing. So we're going to more likely to meet them, more likely to interact with them, or more likely to hear about them than we ever have been before.
Yeah, and they come off very fascinating at first, right?
Oh, yeah, come here, little girl, let me tell you all about this, and, I'm charming, and, you don't know I'm being manipulative because I'm charming, and that I'm enticing and seductive, and you don't realize I'm exploitative, so the light and the dark and the light and the dark, but in the beginning, they're all like, "Oh, I am delighted in you. The focus is on you, and so that I can just get it to pull it over here on me."
Yeah. And I will woo you. And through this wooing process, it feels like that narcissist is kind of taking their bait's temperature. Like, how wooable are they? Can I really
Yeah.
manipulate them? Are they needy of what I can give that will help me get more of what I want?
Yes, exactly. And that temperature gauges how far can I go? How much can I take? And they're looking for that control factor. And the more they feel they can control you, the less they respect you. And then that gets into a horrible imbalance.
Yeah. And but it kind of doesn't make sense because all this person who's the hijackal bait, as you like to call them, somebody who's gotten sucked into that pattern with a hijackal, is the fear of not being accepted and respected, right? And loved and adored, and
Yeah, so you become in service to the needs of the person to be all about me. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone who will serve them. Like what I often say, Laura, about why hijackals have children is 3 reasons. These are my reasons. That they want someone to agree with them, they want someone to serve their purposes, and they want someone to make them look good. And that's why they have children. And so if they have a child who's disabled, if they can't get in the news about how wonderful they are dealing with this child, they are very embarrassed to have that child. And so they're not interested. Or a male hijackal has a son who's not interested in sports, is not interested in things that they're interested in. And they're like, "Oh, no, that's not good enough." And they start making that child the scapegoat. They don't want to pay attention to that child. They'll pay attention to another one of their children who excels at sports because that makes them look good. And so we get into that whole dynamic, which is so very, very unpleasant. And we need to notice those things. But then there are the other people that we're talking about that are just like fearful and trying to control themselves, and they don't feel comfortable talking about other humans as much, because they don't know what to say, or they don't feel their opinion matters, or they don't feel they have insights to share. Of course they do, but they don't feel like they do. So, well, let me just tell you how I feel.
And then all of a sudden you're on another topic.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
has nothing to do with what you originally brought up. And so when a conversation turns to, it feels like it got cut short and turned to a completely irrelevant topic about the other person, that's a good sign to know, oh, that person just switched into all about me. Now, how do we identify if there's someone who maybe we can say something like, hey, I needed help over here. How did we get over to you? Can we go back to me? And is that safe to do with someone who's a hijackal versus someone who just needs a little control over themselves?
No, it's not safe to do with a hijackal in the sense that they may blow up. I mean, from that safe thing, but the healthy thing to do is to say, um, I think we just switched topics, and I really did need more support, or I really did need something. Can we go back to that? And the hijackal, we'll see if they can switch gears depending on their own needs. Whereas the other person will say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't really realize that I'd done that, because it's a subconscious thing that they're operating from, that fear.
Right. Oh, heavy topic.
Yeah. Anything to do with hijackals and hijackal behavior is heavy. But then the other side of it is is sad, that somebody gets into a place where they're so uncomfortable in their own skin that they don't even like talking about themselves, but it's the only thing that they feel they have any authority to speak of.
Right. So it keeps them in a place like, I'm okay. I really have
Yeah.
value here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Tracy's saying it
And
happens all
that's
the
kind of
time.
strange. Yeah.
And let it go of the word I. Tell her to let go of the word I.
Yes. Well, yeah, Tracy, you know about that for sure. Because we've talked about that offline. But yeah, I mean, if your major focus is let me talk about myself, then it's worth having a look to say why. But if you happen to be a hijackal, why would I look at that? I am the most interesting creature in the room. I'm not going to look at
I'm
that.
always right, and
Yeah, it
someone's
is.
always wrong, and I have to blame somebody or put somebody in a position of being a scapegoat. Otherwise, the world wouldn't work right.
Well, yeah, and if I don't make them into a scapegoat, I'm going to make them into a stepping stone. Like, oh, let me tell you why I'm better at that. Let me tell you why I'm the best at that. Let me tell you why I've done it more. I've done it longer. I have more experience. They'll always find an angle, and they'll always one up you. But the other category, they won't. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, and they feel like they need to withdraw, that they're not worthy of continuing the conversation.
Right.
And that's a sad way of being too.
Yeah. And so if you catch yourself making things all about yourself, and you can identify that if you have that self-awareness, then you can slowly look at that and work on one's self-esteem, get some help, talk through this pattern and adjust it as you can. It may be sometimes I like to say it's an inside job that gets done with some outside help.
Yeah, very well said. And, if people have hijackal tendencies, or if people are full-blown hijackals, they're not the least bit interested in one one word of change, because they're right, they're flawless. Now, don't put your compassion hats on, as I always say, but let me give you a little inside scope into what's going on, a little scoop, I guess. Hijackals are very fragile. They're very, very fragile. They come from a lot of fear as well. And the fear of having a flaw is number one. And that's where the arrogance comes from. That's where that comes from, a covert hijack, or an overt hijackal, rather. That's of course you want to know about me and you want my opinion and all. But then the covert side of that is the victim, the person who is saying, well, nobody's interested in me. Nobody wants to hear about me. Nobody cares. Nobody gives me anything. Nobody ever does anything for me. I should just go home and eat worms,
I don't
And
know if you're so covert though, because
well, it isn't once you recognize the pattern, you're right.
But think about it. I mean, I heard this phrase the other day and it resonated so strongly with me from what I've seen from people who are hijackals. And, it seems like the biggest victims are the biggest bullies, or the biggest bullies are the biggest victims, claim to be the biggest bullies, claim to be the biggest victims.
Yeah,
So
I think you're
that's
right in the claim to be department. Yeah.
right. The claim to be the biggest victim. I'm always the one who's being victimized. And can't you see that the world is against me? And I don't understand why, because I'm such a good person.
Everybody's out to get me. Everybody wants something from me, and I'm running as fast as I can to please all these people, and it's never enough. It's just never enough. People always want something more from me,
Or they're always, not only wanting something more, or they're making me wrong, and I'm only trying to do so much for so many people, but nobody appreciates me, and I get this and that thrown at me, and so I am just the biggest victim here, but I've actually not been doing nice things to other people.
Right. And also, because I just had all that to say, I just took up all the airtime, and guess what? It's all about me again.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
no, it may not be all about you. It may be about somebody completely different. It may be about an issue. It may be about a greater cause. And we can even talk about it, because the other person who's making it all about me is taking up, like you said, all that airtime and shifting the focus. And I just wish we could put a mute button.
Yeah. Let's have everybody install a mute button.
And when you hear the all about me, you can hear it like the Charlie Brown, wah, 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 or mute it and have a real conversation. Let's move things forward.
Yeah. That would be fun.
Because then I feel a victim to that. It's like,
well, as long as I have the mute button and I'm in control of it, that's great. Like, I just don't hear you anymore. But the thing is that we have to recognize these patterns, otherwise we'll get sucked into them. And if we don't see them, we can, as healthy people, as people who care, as people who value human interaction and listen and have compassion for human pain, when a person who has these differences or disorders in whichever direction we're going, as healthy people, we lean in and, tell me more about that. So we have to have that ability to discern, like, wow, I just had lunch with that person, and I think I spoke for 20 seconds, and the rest of the time was all about them. I wonder if there's a pattern here. It's always well advised to become very conscious of what's actually going on, not just to keep leaning in, because when people are in relationship with a hijackal, good people keep leaning in and leaning in and leaning in. Like, I'll do a little more, I'll listen a little harder, I'll meet your needs, and hopefully I'll come to the enough place and we'll get some balance. But we have to recognize there is never an enough place. They will just take and take and take and take and take, and you will become an overgiver. And as you become an overgiver, you will be exhausted. And all of your goodwill will be exhausted. You may become physically exhausted. You really will be emotionally exhausted. And those are big signs that somebody is an emotional vampire, an emotional vacuum cleaner, just sucking up everything you have. And they always want more. I was working with a family yesterday, and they have a situation where one of their adult children married a hijackal. And I work with many people in many parts of the country, actually, in many parts of the world, that have that same issue. And they come to me to say, what are the steps? How can I see my grandchildren? How can I still have a relationship with my adult child? And that becomes very, very difficult, because we have to learn how to understand what's going on, to recognize what can change, to recognize that I have to know who I am and how I want to interact, because they were at the place of, well, they never do this and they never do that, and we feel so badly, we're excluded and we're always wrong. And I was saying to them, well, I understand when a hijackal asks for something and you give it to them, then they move the marker and say it wasn't quite what they wanted. They were expecting a little more, a little different, because you can never be right. So you understand that phenomenon and you no longer expect to meet the marker. And then you learn to put your boundaries in place as to how far you'll go towards that marker. And that's when you start establishing places that you know where your limits are. And then we see what's possible. And these are the important things for everybody, whether or not that's the situation that you have.
Yeah, it's really about stopping the giving on one's end and limiting the exposure. But like you want to see the grandkids, and there's got to be some sort of negotiation that goes on. And that is not easy because it's not typical negotiation skills. So don't go to a negotiation expert, go to a hijackal expert.
Yeah, well, that was interesting you brought that up because the person was the father in this situation. He said, "Well, I've negotiated in business forever, but this is different." Yeah, it's different, right? It is different, and we have to know who we are. Like so often, people say to me, "Well, how far should I go? Like I'm uncomfortable," but maybe they have a hijackal parent, and the hijackal parent is maybe a covert hijackal. So the hijackal's playing the poor me, nobody cares about me, nobody meets my needs, nobody comes to see me. Yeah, and you're going like, yeah, there's a good reason for that. But then you wonder, like, what if that parent gets sick? What should I do? Like, and the question I always put back to the people who are asking me that is, who are you?
Hmm.
How do your values play into this? What would you do for any human? And then is it safe to do it for that particular human? We
Hmm.
have to calibrate that and figure that out because we can't be running as fast as we can in all directions in order to make a hijackal happy. And we couldn't do it when they were well, and you'll do it even more poorly when they're sick. So how much can you be around that person without taking on the toxicity?
And
And
getting sick yourself.
yes, exactly. And so these are different calibrations than they are when a friend gets ill and you go, "Oh, what can I do to help?" Because you're not gonna get beaten down and hit around the head and shoulders continuously with put downs and tear downs and wear downs from your past your whole life. So you have to know what ammunition is going to be thrown at you.
Yeah, using those boundaries strategically, really thinking through. It's not easy. That's why I love what you do with your podcast, with your work, with people individual, with your membership site. Um, there's so much gold you have to give to people to arm them with information and then strategies to kind of build that personal power, I guess it's really
Mhm.
what it is.
Yeah, thank you. It's certainly a legacy that I want to put out there. But, on today's topic, really good starting point is to say, let me think about the last conversation I had with a friend and calibrate. Was it an equitable conversation?
Mm.
Because I was mentioning to you before we started that one of the things that we always have to be able to calibrate is those three must haves of a healthy adult relationship. And that means that when you become an adult, you're an adult to adult with a hijackal parent or a difficult parent or a needy parent. And those three things show up in this conversation because if there isn't equality and there isn't reciprocity and there isn't mutuality, then those are big red flags. And, you know, we know about that. And if there isn't that, then we have to first say, "Hey, is it possible to get any of those three things in this relationship?" And if you can't even have equal airtime, and I don't mean it all the time, I mean, sometimes someone has a problem and obviously, but when the overall balance is equitable, great. But if it's leaning terribly to one side, you have to notice that. And then the reciprocity thing, can you come and do this for me? It would be great if you could come and do this. Do you have time to do this? And then when you ring them up and say, I need some help, I'm too busy. Right? Well, it's not a scoreboard. It's not tit for tat.
Or how dare you ask that?
Yeah, like
I'm so busy.
you could hire somebody to do that. Why are you asking me? Well, it's because we're friends and that's what friends do. But,
don't do that to me. There's a victim sense to that, right? It's like, I
exactly.
didn't do anything. I just asked a question, right?
Exactly. And then the mutuality part is that we know each other well enough to know what the other wants and needs and what direction they're going in and their goals. And we say, yeah, I got that. I understand that. How can I support you? And that's the difference. I mean, you're not going to have equality, reciprocity, and mutuality with a checkout person at the grocery store, but anybody that you have in your friends circle, and particularly anybody that you're going to bring into your intimate circle, must have absolute bedrock of a healthy relationship: equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And if they're not there, the wheels are going to fall off, and you're going to feel like you're leaning in and giving and giving and giving. And then you know what happens after you do that for a while. You get into resentment. And when you get into resentment, you then start, because you're a good person, you start beating yourself up. I shouldn't resent that. I should give more. And then you get into the whole lack of equality. And now everything's gone in one direction, and you're left there feeling exhausted and bereft. And then you're made wrong for still not giving. That's the moment when you have that inclination, and I hope you follow it, that says, I need to get out of here.
Exactly. So going back to our topic about people make everything about themselves, my takeaway or the litmus test is really, what kind of control are they looking for? Are they just a little bit insecure and looking for more control over their own identity and their ego? Or are they looking for control over a whole situation and yourself, and going to put the blame back on you and make you feel bad for even mentioning that they made it all about you, or they made it all about themselves? And if they punish you for it, chances are you're with a hijackal, and that's where all of your wonderful resources come in. And everything about rational communication goes away. You have to have specific strategies that set up boundaries. And that's so much of what we talk about here. And we hope that we're empowering your personal, awareness tools. Yeah.
Absolutely. Boundaries are not some harsh, horrible thing that unloving people have. Boundaries are things that say, I love myself enough to say, here's the point at which I'm uncomfortable. And I care enough to tell you that, so I can see if you care enough to honor that boundary. That's all. It's not harsh. It's not a horrible thing to do. It's a healthy thing to do.
Yeah. And if anyone calls you on it, that's another sign of they want the control over you. And they don't want these 3 pillars of a relationship of equality, reciprocity, mutuality. And you'll always feel like you're in some sort of tension or struggle with them, or not good enough yourself. They're the ones making you crazy. So you're not crazy. You're healthy if you want equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And if your person you're dealing with on the other side doesn't, it's going to be struggle. And I highly recommend your programs, Dr.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're very excited. We just did a renovation of the website. We have a new checklist that you might want to know about, Laura, and people listening might want to know about. You wonder if you're with a toxic hijackal partner? Well, we now have a checklist free called Is Your Partner a Toxic Hijackal? And you can find all my checklists at forrelationshiphelp.com/checklists. And go there. There are 4 of them. There's the relationship checklist, the passive-aggressive checklist, the toxic partner checklist, and the personal integrity checklist. So there's a lot to learn there for free. So go.
And what I love about your work is, yeah, you deal a lot with people in their personal lives, but this can impact your professional lives too, because if you have people who are
Sure.
difficult to work with, you need to know how to strategically set those boundaries. And more than that, I loved your word you used, which was discerning. And when you can discern what's going on, you can make the communication choices that will prove for the best outcome for yourself, your client, and the connection you're talking with on that. And so, as a marketer, and in particular, a relationship marketer, I constantly have to identify, who am I talking with? Do I want to take this client on because I've been able to discern whether they're going
Yeah.
to do, even in business relationships, you need those three pillars, right? And if they're not, I'm like, I set enough boundaries that they pass, or I let them
Mhm.
know, I don't think I can do what you want. I think it's better if you find somebody else. And trust me, it's a good thing to make that choice.
For sure, and going back to the earlier part of our conversation, in your world, what you were just bringing up is so relevant. If you get a client who is like, "Well, I don't know if I should even be marketing, I don't know anything," and they're talking about their fear and they're talking about their concern, and then you ask them to take a step and they won't do it. That goes in one direction, and then you have clients on the other end of the spectrum who say, "I know exactly what I want, and it has to be like that," and they don't honor your expertise. Why are they there? Why are they coming to you for your insight and expertise if they've already decided exactly how it ought to be? And so you're arguing with them to share your expertise that they supposedly came to you for.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, these things act absolutely happen in business, and they happen everywhere. And if there isn't any equality and reciprocity and mutuality, no matter where in a healthy adult relationship, notice it, right? I mean, if you're in a workplace and someone's paying your salary, then these things, they may give you the answer to why you feel uncomfortable and undervalued. And that may give you an idea, like, maybe I should look for another position. Of course, this is not a great time to be doing that, but that might give you at least the insight to say, well, I know what irks me about this place. There really isn't any equality. Everybody's fighting for positioning and nobody helps each other. There isn't any reciprocity. There's no team spirit that we're all in this together and mutual. It's like everybody's jockeying to be the top of the one who takes credit for everything. At least you can diagnose what's going on and then know how to respond, and that could take away a little bit of the pain.
Yeah. And I liked what you said for people who are taking on clients, about the clients. When I've taken on a client and they're not getting results and they're not following the prescription that I kind of laid out here, I often see that they have some self-sabotaging
Right.
things going on. And that's beyond my scope in that. And I will recommend they come back when they feel they've dealt with whatever's in the way. I'll gently point out, I think, well, if they're open, if I can sense that they're open, I might say, hey, you might need some extra help because it seems like there's this pattern going on. And they're
Right.
like, yeah. And I said, well, I'm not an expert at the pattern. I might refer them over to you or someone else, and or say, find someone who can help you explore what's underneath that psychologically. Then let's get back together. And I think we can do this all with a sense of dignity, pride, caring, and support for moving forward in people. And that's what I there shouldn't we need to destigmatize getting help. And I think we're really close to doing that. And there's so many more people talking about this. You're out there every day. And I just wanted to give a shout out to those of you who are giving us some love. Thanks, Charmaine, Mike, Tessa, glad you're going to watch the replay. She was having spotty internet. So I just
Yeah.
love what you have to say about being able to be discerning on who we take on, and then go get help when we need it.
Absolutely. Help is not a weakness, help is a strength. It says, I noticed something that I could do better. I want to do better, so let me get some help. Let me lean into somebody who has some greater understanding of that. I can't know everything. I don't know everything. I call up Laura and say, hey, what do you think about this? And she calls up me, and we have a conversation, and we have, guess what? Equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And you deserve to have that in your life too, if you're listening. And really important to notice if it's not available to you in certain relationships, and then realize that if it's not available, totally not available, the other person is unwilling, or you recognize you're unwilling to go any further with it, then start to back away from it. Put some emotional distance if you can't put physical distance.
Yeah. I mean, when we start standing for equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, we get more of it.
Exactly.
And it's some tough choices sometimes have to be made, but we're here for you. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Rhoberta, for your wisdom as always. Please find us at transformtoday.com and Rhoberta at forrelationshiphelp.com, and her free checklists at forrelationshiphelp.com/checklist. Lists, plural. All right. Thanks, Rhoberta. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Laura. Bye-bye.